Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, That Model Railway Guy, and welcome to a video about trees. Yes, trees! The vast majority of us probably have them on our layouts. Even if you have a particularly urban style layout, you may just be able to squeeze a tree in there somewhere. However, if like me you're building a modular or a portable exhibition style layout where at the end of every running session you have to pack it all down, you're probably storing your layout sections on top of each other, so stacked like that. However, trees can cause a bit of a problem here because they're so tall. So what do? Do you give yourself a bit of extra height to fit the trees in? Well, that is one option, but I've come up with something a little bit different. It's quite ingenious if I do say so myself, but it's not going to be to everyone's taste, so let's have a look, shall we?
So to form the basis of these removable trees, I'm going to use the Woodlands Scenics Tree Armatures. There seems to be mixed feelings around these. Some people think they're great and others think they look terrible. I'm generally of the opinion that they're alright and can look really good if you're willing to put in a bit of time. Also, they're quite robust, which is great for us considering that the nature of removable trees means that we'll be moving them around quite a lot. The armature comes with a base moulded onto it, which you can just cut off. We need to keep this handy though because we'll be using it in a moment. With the base cut away, there are a few mould lines and marks on the armature that it's a good idea to cut away. And to do this, just carefully drag your craft knife across the mould lines to remove the excess flashing. In some instances, on this ejector pin mark for example, you may have to cut away larger sections. So the bits we've cut away are now smooth, and so we want to give this a bit of texture like the rest of the trunk has. So using the knife again, just score some lines running downwards to create the impression of grain on the trunk. At this point we can also bend out the armature so that it's less two-dimensional and looks more like the skeleton for a tree. While these armatures are moulded in brown plastic, it is a bit shiny, just like the plastic sleepers can be on our track. It's easy to tone this down though by adding a light coat of brown paint, and this also helps the tree to feel less mass-produced and more unique. There's lots of different things you could do here to make each tree your own, so feel free to have a play around and experiment. One thing I occasionally do though is to dry brush on a white or ivory coloured paint, which sounds odd, but this brings out the moulded detail on the trunk quite nicely. So while we leave all this to dry, let's now turn our attention to how we'll actually add the tree onto our layout. So here is my demonstration board, which you've seen in plenty of videos by now, and at this point I had the landscape roughly in place, but I hadn't started work on the scenery yet. To allow our tree to be removable, I'm going to use the base that came with the armature by embedding it into the landscape. Using some modelling compound, I'll set the base on the layout and then build up the compound all around it. Modelling compound, if you're wondering, is similar to sculptor mould, for example. It's a powdery substance that you can add water to, and it turns into this goop, which is really useful for making model railways. So as you can see, I'm using the compound to set the position of the base, and then build up the land around it so that we'll just have a stump poking out of the top. Some of you may have already worked out where this is going, so we can now continue on with the scenery. First, I give the whole area a coat of brown paint. And a little step you can add here if you want to go the extra mile is to add a layer of dirt around where the tree will go. Lay down some PVA glue around the base of the stump and then simply sprinkle some dirt scatter over it. In this instance, I'm actually using dried dirt I got from the garden, but you can also buy lots of different scatter materials if you prefer to use those instead. If you've ever looked at a tree, they often have exposed soil around their bases like this. This is where the sunlight can't get to the ground or the nutrients are being sucked out of the soil by the tree, and so the grass doesn't grow all that well. Obviously this isn't the case for every tree, but like I said, it's a little extra step that I feel breaks up the grass layer and makes things feel a bit more realistic. Speaking of grass, now let's add some of that, and again the first step is to put down a layer of PVA glue. I'm going to be using static grass for this, and I've actually done a whole nother tutorial on this, so if you're interested, click the link at the top right of the video now to see that. Essentially though, I add a base layer of static grass which covers the vast majority of the board. Then later, when that's all dried, I go back over it, adding patches of longer grass in different colours, which just adds a bit of variation. Around the site of our tree in particular, I'm using a dead grass colour, which I think will work nicely with the dirt layer we added earlier. And that's the scenic work complete, so now let's finish up work on our actual tree. So the paint is dry on our tree, but it's looking a bit sparse. If you're going for a dead tree or a more winter look, this is perfect, but most of us like to have a bit of foliage on our trees. Now, there are hundreds of ways to do this, but one of the quickest ways is to use Woodlands Scenics Fine Leaf Foliage. This box comes with a big clump of foliage that is perfect for use on trees and as bushes. All we'll do is pull a small clump off and attach it to our trees bit by bit. I use superglue along the branches, which I then press the foliage down into. The superglue is nice and strong, and it doesn't take long to set either, which I like because it means I can work more quickly. Then it's really just a case of repeating this process until you've covered the entire tree. Now I like to start at the bottom with bigger chunks and then work my way upwards, gradually using less and less, but again, feel free to experiment here. Now like I said, this is just one way of adding foliage to trees, and this is by no means a detailed tutorial on it. Other popular ways of doing it involve using sea foam, moss, or even polyfiber sheets, and these will all create different looking trees. It's best to find a technique though that gives finished results that you like the look of, or even better, use a mixture of techniques to create different types of trees. You want to make sure, however, that whatever you do use is okay with being knocked around a bit. Just like I said with the armatures at the beginning, these trees are going to have to withstand a lot of handling as we move them about, so you don't want to use something that's too delicate. I've tried a few different techniques myself, but I really do like using this fine leaf foliage. It is expensive though, but to be honest, I think it's worth it for the effect it gives, while also being strong enough to handle being moved around. Usually I can get around 2 to 3 big trees out of this one box, and any small bits that fall off or don't get used can always be made into bushes or ground cover. Anyway, our tree is looking nice and complete now, and so I think it's time to add it to the layout. So it couldn't be easier to position the tree on the layout. You can see the base we embedded earlier on, and the peg on the bottom of the tree is designed to clip straight into this. And there we go, the tree is in place. Now, like I said at the start, this won't be for everyone. One of the downsides of this is that at the bottom of the tree, you can see the gap where the base and the trunk meet. That said, in my opinion, it's only really noticeable when you see it close up on camera like this. From a normal viewing distance, it's almost invisible, unless you're looking for it specifically, and admittedly I could have done a lot more to blend it in. Adding bushes and more ground cover around the base would help, and also having the top be flush with the ground rather than sticking up a bit would be a way of disguising it better too. Anyway, the point of this video was to make a removable tree, so we better try that. And as you can see, it comes out just as easily as it went in. And here's a quick look at how I store all the different modules for the layout, and because the trees are removable, it does mean I can stack them quite close together. If the trees were still in place, then I'd have to leave extra room for these between the modules, and knowing how clumsy I am, there's a good chance they'd get damaged too. And this way, at least if I do damage a tree, I can repair it away from the layout, or just make a new one entirely. So, I hope you found this tutorial useful, and hopefully it's given you some ideas. That's going to be it for now though guys, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!